All right, welcome back to the Writers Craft Summit. In this session, I'm speaking with Catherine Greenspan and Elizabeth Atkins. Welcome to the summit.
Thank you,
Thank
Kevin,
you,
for having
Kevin.
us.
I'm so thrilled to have you guys here today. In this session, we are going to dig into the topic of diversity. I think it's a really important topic, obviously, and also a timely topic. So maybe right off the top here, Catherine, can you let me know perhaps what is diversity to you? What does it mean to bring diversity to writing?
A lot of diversity in fiction writing for me has to do with characters and character development and traits that characters have that make them interesting and compelling, and unique and likable or dislikable, depending on the story. But the main thing I think is that we tend to have, if you stop and think about when you're reading about a character, there's this assumption that characters are all white unless they're specified otherwise. And it isn't so much a matter of saying that this is a Black character or this is a Latina character. It's more of being creative with how that character, what is it about that character that makes them unique without having to just put the black white label on them.
Mhm.
What about you, Elizabeth?
I think it's really important to have diverse characters in fiction because America is diverse, the world is diverse, and we all want to see a reflection of ourselves on the pages of the books we're reading. I've literally watched children reading a book, looking for characters in the book that look like them. And so diversity is a big umbrella. It's not just race, it's ethnicity, it's culture, it's geographic, it's religion, it's anything that makes you unique. LGBT, it can be a person with a physical disability, it can be somebody with a mental illness. Diversity to me just is a broad, comprehensive representation of all that we are. It's a really fun challenge as a writer to convey that in a character.
So you both mentioned this idea of reader identification.
Mhm.
Are there some other benefits to writing diverse characters? Off the top of my mind, I'm thinking, I think one of you alluded to this as well. It's a better reflection of reality, right? If we
Yes.
want to write something that
Yes.
feels like
Yeah.
real life is filled with diversity. And so we want to reflect that on the page. Is that realism part of what you think diversity in writing is, Catherine?
Oh no, go ahead, Elizabeth.
Oh, well, readers have actually told me. So my first three novels have mixed race characters who are half black and half white. And readers have told me that they learned a new perspective from reading these characters because they went to the books with preconceived notions about biracial people. And once they read the stories, they realized some of their notions were not correct. So it's an opportunity to educate people about the reality that occurs in that mixed race character or LGBT or whatever the mindset is of that diverse individual. Yes.
The Veronica series is also about a character who's biracial. Can you speak
Right.
about that a bit?
Yeah, actually, what I was going to say before your question was that I also had some young readers. They were like 10 and 11, and they wrote me letters after reading the Veronica books, saying that they were really, really sweet, cute letters, and they were just
Mhm.
about that they learned something, not in those words. They had the special way that 10-year-olds talk, but it was really nice that their minds were opened to new things. But yeah, the Veronica series is about a biracial 14-year-old girl who looks white. Her mother's black and her father's white, but she looks white. And so when she's in middle school, what happens is her friends and just acquaintances, everybody starts making a big deal about the fact that she's biracial. And so then what she has to do, or what she does through the adventures of her life, is figure out, okay, who am I? Where do I fit in? And why is this so important to everybody else? Because it's really not a big deal to me.
Mhm.
And obviously, both of you have drawn from your life and your own experiences and brought that to your art. Do you think do you think you have to have grown up in a diverse family or a diverse environment to be able to bring those characters to your work?
No, I don't
Uh,
believe
uh,
so. Well, so for example, when I wrote the book with Billy D. Williams called Twilight, a romantic story that takes place in Brazil and Los Angeles, I've never been to Brazil. So I had to research life there, culture, religion, food, dance, everything. So just as you can research a place so well and write about it that people say, well, when were you in Brazil? Brazilians ask me that question. That means I did my job as a researcher. You can do the same by interviewing people. And Catherine and I are also both ghostwriters. So we're able, actually, we have something called what I call being a literary chameleon, where we can take on the voice of writing for someone else as if it's them. So you can do that with a character. You just have to be accurate, or you lose all credibility to the person who, like, say, for example, your character is Chinese American and you're writing from a Chinese American perspective and you get something wrong. That would be a big problem. So you have to do exquisite research to make certain that you're impeccably accurate.
Yeah, I'd like to dig into that topic a little deeper, actually. This demonstrates my own bias, right? Coming at it, like, I'm very conscious of being like a white man hosting this conversation,
Mm.
and hosting this summit, right? I'm pretty clear of that positioning. Um, so forgive me if I dig into down this rabbit hole a little bit, but what sorts of things do say non-minority writers need to be aware of when they're trying to write diversity? So what if, I believe in a diverse world and I believe in equality and I want to reflect multiple different types of groups of people in my writing, but what are the dangers of that if you are not a minority yourself?
Well, there was recently an article in the New York Times where someone wrote a book and it was portraying, I want to say it took place in Alaska. I don't remember all the details or the title. This poor author was absolutely lambasted by critics who said her writing was racist in her portrayal of the native people she was writing about, which I think was fictitious. But here's the answer to that, Kevin. And first of all, it's very important, and we commend you for having the conversation, because so many people are afraid to say the wrong thing and get offended, offend someone, that they just don't talk about it. And that solves no problem. That helps no one. So this is awesome that you're having the conversation, and people should find the courage to do so. But for the writer who's not a minority or doesn't fit into the category of diversity that they're writing about, you need to find a consultant or a friend who, say, for example, you're writing about an amputee. Have them read it. Is this accurate of what an amputee would think and do and say and feel? Or if you're writing about a person who's from Mexico, is this accurate? Is this offensive? Is this okay? Do you like this? Just ask. And I think people will be very, very happy to assist you in making certain that you're being culturally sensitive and accurate.
Right, because the last thing you want to do is just use stereotypes, and and if something is a stereotype but you are not aware that it is, this friend or consultant would definitely help you out in determining whether it's a stereotype, whether it's accurate or needs to be modified.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think this is becoming, which I think is great, standard practice to the point where there's a term for it, right? Sensitivity readers, right? If
Mhm.
you are dealing with potentially sensitive issues, it just makes sense to get that into readers' hands from people who have been through that experience or who have lived that life.
Mhm.
Yes.
Mhm.
So I think so let's get away from, okay, I'm white, how do I write diverse characters? What I'm more interested in is, if I'm a minority, how do I get over the hump of, oh, if I want to be a big hit, if I want to be mainstream, I have to write for that white mainstream audience. How can people of minority people or people with diverse aspects, how can they embrace that difference and reflect that in their art and be confident that they can still find success in their writing? Maybe Catherine, you can start with that one.
Oh, sure. I think it's the same thing for anybody. If you are driven and you believe and are authentic and speaking from your authentic self and your voice and your truth, you just have to do that, because trying to fit yourself into somebody else, trying to fit yourself into somebody else's box is never going to work for you. I mean, you're always going to be, it can lead to feeling resentment, and not being true to your art is the last thing you want to do. That's what I would suggest.
Mm-hmm. And I agree with that, with what Catherine said. You have a story to tell from your own voice, from your own experience, from your own perspective, and just write it from your heart and soul. I mean, look at some of the most popular works of writing by writers of color. For example, The Color Purple or The Bluest Eye. They wrote because those were the stories that their souls, Alice Walker and Toni Morrison, were saying, just write this story. And so they let it pour out the way it was supposed to come out, and the world received it beautifully.
Yeah, there's this authenticity that speaks to people, and I think it's what you're alluding to is it's that whole idea of marketing where the surest way to fail is to try to be everything for everyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead,
Mm-hmm.
be your true self and embrace what makes you unique. And when you do that, not everyone is going to love it, but
Right.
other people out there are going to resonate with it. And I think
Yes.
that's what both of
Right.
you have experienced when you've talked about readers coming to you and saying, I saw myself in your work.
Right. Yes. Yes. I love that. It's an awesome feeling of accomplishment and contribution. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Do you think there's a way to write? Is the issue of diversity always political? Can I fill a book with diverse characters and not have it be a statement about anything other than life is full of diverse people? Or is maybe, okay, I'll stop it there while you're clapping. What are your thoughts there, Elizabeth?
Well, I think that's the answer to everything, is that you just normalize it. So you don't say, oh, my Black neighbors are coming over for dinner. You just write about the neighbors coming over for dinner, and then somehow say they have brown skin, or they're talking about their African American tradition or something. You can fit it in that way and not make the issue be race. They're people, and they come with this cultural and racial background that becomes part of the story. You see? And it's really cool. It's just all about normalizing. And I've witnessed it many times in real life and also in my writing. One of my novels, I have a cast of characters and it includes everybody. And the story's not about race at all. It's about people and love. And they all come together, and they just happen to be from this country or from this religion, and everybody's together. So that's the way to do it, is to normalize it.
Absolutely. This idea of diversity, I think we see it a lot in children's fiction. And I think right now we're seeing in the young adult world, there's a lot of discussions about representation in the fiction. I don't know if that conversation has made its way to the world of kind of adult literature yet. Can you speak a bit to this idea of bringing this issue out of the kind of it's story time mode and like didactically kind of teaching it to our young ones that they need to hear? Let's talk about bringing that to the world of just contemporary fiction.
Mm-hmm. Well, people need to write more, and certainly lots of writers of color do get recognized and celebrated, but they're definitely in the distinct minority. But everybody who has a story should just write it and promote it and share it and encourage others to read it. And that's how word spreads. I mean, I remember in the early 90s when the publishing world was just exploding with new Black authors like Elin Harris, who wrote he was a Black gay man, and he was a New York Times bestselling author because he was writing from a voice that had never been heard. And so the world was just fell in love with his writing because it was so unique. And we all are so unique. We all have to write from that perspective, that what's new and different that I can share in fiction.
I think, oh, sorry, go ahead,
Oh
Catherine.
no, I was going to say that that is the key, because what if we try to fit in, again going back to trying to squeeze into somebody else's box, that's where our nuances and our unique differences are going to fall away. So if Elin Harris had said, wow, there are no Black gay authors, maybe I shouldn't write about that topic.
Mm-hmm.
We probably wouldn't be talking about him, because he wouldn't have become a New York Times bestselling author in his lifetime. But it's the things, we have to embrace the things that make us different. And those things aren't necessarily the black and white things. I mean, yeah, when I was a
I was
kid.
going to say, I think the two of you. Oh,
yeah,
yeah,
no, go ahead.
We've got two sisters here, right? So here's a perfect example of two people who grew up in the same household,
Right.
who I'm quite sure have very different views on the world and completely different perspectives in your fiction writing.
Yes,
Right,
we do.
Exactly. I mean, we grew up with, our parents were not just, we didn't just have a Black mother and a white father. They had a 25-year age difference, which is huge when you're 10 years
Which
old.
is another form of diversity,
Exactly.
right?
Yes.
And I remember when I was like in 5th grade, I was having an argument with a friend of mine, and she said something about my mother not marrying somebody her own age. And it was just so bizarre, because I thought when she started saying this that she was going to say race. But in her vision, it was, that's so weird that your dad is so old, so much older than your mom. So there's another diversity that we grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I think that's the overarching theme here, is that I think it's really easy, especially with the political climate in America right now, to focus in on race. But when we're talking about diversity of characters, we're not just talking about race. We're also talking about, like you talked about at the beginning, disabled people, LGBTQ, people, old, young and old. The world is full of amazing, diverse people. And so we want to populate our fiction with that.
Right.
Yes.
And my favorite author growing up, like, I'm sure this isn't unique, but it was Judy Blume. She was my hero. And in her book, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, of course, that's about getting periods and boobs and boys. But I remember that Margaret, one of her parents was Jewish. And so and that was not an issue in the book. This was not about having one Jewish parent and one Christian parent. But I asked a bunch of my friends a couple years ago if they remembered that, and nobody had remembered that.
Wow.
Yeah. So here the book is about, this character that we could all relate to, because we were either about to go through what she was going through, or we were going through it. But this very subtle difference between Margaret and her friends with the parents' religion didn't even make an impression on anybody. But it was there.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's two different approaches, right? Where you can really wear your politics on your sleeve and say, this is a book about religion or about discrimination or about whatever, or you can weave it into the thread of the story and just say, that's the normalization approach, and just say, this is life, and there's all sorts of complexities to it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the publishing side of things for a while, because in addition to being authors and ghostwriters, you're both publishers. How do you bring issues about diversity into your approach to publishing? And how might small presses differ from mainstream presses when it comes to being able to get diverse voices out into the marketplace?
That's a great question.
Elizabeth.
Okay.
Elizabeth, maybe you can lead that one off.
So Catherine and I actually started a publishing company so we could publish our own books that we've written. And we published her 3, the Veronica series, 3 young adult novels. We published my book, Dark Secret, which is about a mixed race woman passing for white. And so we started off on our own personal quest to write ourselves into American literature, to affirm and heal our own stories. And then just by osmosis, it's so fascinating. We attracted clients who have similar diverse stories. They're not the biracial issue, but just being unique, like a sharecropper's son who went on to become the president of the American Red Cross. So we've attracted people who reflect our personal mission that became our professional quest. So what we believe is if people have a burning desire to write a story that reflects their unique perspective and experience, whether it's race, religion, sexual orientation, physical ability, whatever it is, they should write it, Kevin. They should write it, and we are a place where they are welcome to be published because we believe it's extremely important to populate the world with books that showcase the diversity of all people.
Catherine, can you build on that? That was pretty good.
That
Maybe she
was,
captured it all.
yeah. Look, I want to. There's something
I was
about
making a mental note. I was like, oh, I'm gonna pull a quote from there. There's
something about the pipeline of books in the flow of books to be published by the traditional publishers. Can you expand on that, Elizabeth?
Yes. So the New York Times had a big story analyzing that, and it was really fascinating. I think it was the Times. Well, I've read a lot about this subject, and the pipeline, starting with agents to acquisition editors to marketing people to book reviewers, the whole pipeline that a book follows is predominantly white and has been. And as a result, the books that get shopped, sold, marketed, and reviewed tend to be books by white authors. So there's a lot of awareness, there's a lot of work being done to change that, but that's the reason why we're even having this conversation, because work remains to give everybody a fair shot at. And you know, the problem goes back to who can afford to be an intern in a publishing house during their college years not getting paid. Someone whose parents can pay for them to live in New York City and work for free at an internship at a publishing company. And then who probably will get hired in those jobs. And so they become the editors. And it boils down to very complicated socioeconomic issues in our country. But people are working on changing that. So it's really a matter of having representation along that pipeline so people can recognize, hey, we don't have any books by a Jamaican American author here. We don't have any books by a Chinese American woman. We need something about a veteran. You know, so to recognize what's not there. So it's really about diversifying the chain of people in the book industry who make the decisions about what books get bought, published, promoted, and reviewed.
And I think it's interesting. I grew up as a punk rocker. That's my artistic background, was playing in punk bands. And there's this ethos in punk rock where it's always do it yourself. There's no interest. Like in almost every other musical field, the natural progression is like, get a deal with a big label, with a major label. Whereas in punk rock, that's like frowned upon. You never want, right? So my whole artistic career has always been about like, screw the mainstream, let's build our own little scene.
Yeah.
And so when I moved into the world of literature, it's such a natural progression for me to embrace the idea of small publishing and embrace the idea of indie publishing and self-publishing, because I never wanted to sign the major label deal in my band. And so why would I want to do that with my writing?
Right. I love that. That's exactly why we started our own company, because we were tired of saying, oh, please, please, please represent me. Please, please, please buy my book. Please, please, please promote me. No, it's so liberating to be able to own it. We own everything from start to finish. We make all the decisions about cover design and everything.
Yeah, and I think maybe that's where we can wrap this conversation up, is this message that, I mean, I want to send out via this summit, and I know you guys want to get out as well, is just that we need more diverse voices. We need people embracing their uniqueness, bringing that to their art. And I think there's never been a better time for it. The old ways of doing things, that old pipeline is falling to pieces, right? And so if you're watching this and you're someone who's part of this summit and you want to be an author and you feel different or ostracized or a minority, or you feel like society won't accept you in some way, embrace that, because there's never been a better time to do that.
Right.
Do you agree, Kath?
Yeah, I do agree wholeheartedly. And it goes back to what I said at the beginning. If you are being true to yourself and you know you're a good writer, then just do it. Just keep pushing forward and don't compromise your truth, your true voice. Just keep pushing forward.
So Kevin, I want to say something about the value of doing that, of sharing the story, because there are so many children and people out there who feel alone. When Catherine and I were growing up, we had nobody that we knew of who was a white looking biracial kid. There was no, or even biracial. It wasn't like Barack Obama, Tiger Woods, Mariah Carey, Derek Jeter. You can name so many people now. And so there was nobody for us to look up to and say, wow, they're like us. When you write your story and tell your unique truth, whatever it is, then you are not only healing and affirming yourself, you're helping countless people to affirm that they're not alone. And that gives them courage and confidence and reassurance. And so you're serving a huge, huge, huge gift to people that can transform them on many levels and help them. So it might seem like you're just writing it for your own desire to write a book, but it also takes tremendous courage to tell your truth in an authentic way, even if you're writing fiction, because people who know you will be like, well, wait, how do you know that? So it takes courage. Writing is scary. It is, but you could use a pen name, or you can just go for it and and blast out your truth, your authenticity, and see what happens. And beautiful things happen, and it's very, very liberating. So we say go for it. Just start writing and don't stop till you finish. And if you want to get published, call Two Sisters Writing and Publishing.
Perfect. Catherine, Elizabeth, this is a really important topic, and I really thank you for taking time to join me on the summit and to discuss this. I think this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you,
Thank you, Kevin. You're awesome.